Hey mama, come in, grab a drink. I'm drinking water today because I'm dehydrated. I hope you've been well. I hope you've had a good week. I think I'm currently at a sleep deficit of about 50 hours, not gonna lie. Let's not pretend that I'm going to bed early tonight though. Let's be honest. I'll probably stuff around way too long and then continue to be tired. You may have seen that recently I posted a couple of episodes 6, 7 and 6, 8 with my daughter Luna, and I got some wonderful responses from you guys. Thank you so much. It's been really, really nice to read so many beautiful comments, both about my child. Obviously, she's incredible and there's no denying that. But a lot of people have written some really nice things about me, my parenting style. I'm no parenting expert. I'll never claim to be. I'm never going to give parenting advice. But it's really nice to see some people kind of acknowledging that there's been some thought put into these conversations that I'm having with my daughter. I also did receive some interesting comments that I wasn't expecting. Of course, people will always have their 2 cents when it comes to how other people parent children. So that is kind of no surprise to me. You know, if they see a confident child, some people see that as a great thing. Other people see that as, you know, a child who's got the mother wrapped around the little finger and is completely manipulating and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, a bit odd. Something that came up a few times though was the fact that I'm having quite adult topic conversations with a child. So particularly my last episode, which was a conversation with my 6-year-old about mum guilt. So episode 68, if you haven't seen it, was quite a lengthy conversation about mum guilt from the perspective of a 6-year-old. There are a number of people who have said that I should not be discussing mum guilt with a child, nor should a child carry the burden of knowing about mum guilt. She shouldn't be existing in this world understanding that I experience guilt for whatever reason when it comes to being her mum. Once again, it's not a parenting podcast, nor am I an expert, and I'm no psychologist either. So everything that I'm going to say from this point on are completely my views, completely my opinions. I fully agree that a child should not be burdened with adult issues, and I also agree that a child should absolutely not be responsible for the emotions of a parent. A child is a child who is yet to understand their own emotions and yet to understand how to navigate those things and have healthy relationships with how they feel about certain things and how they express their emotions. So absolutely should not carry the burden or feel in any way responsible for the mother, let's say, who's feeling guilty over a situation. Now, if you haven't already, please go back and listen to that episode, because you will see that in no way am I discussing current issues of guilt that I'm having with my child and expecting her to solve anything or expecting her to console me in any way. So let's just be clear on that. It was a conversation about mum guilt as a general topic. When I talk to my daughter about topics like mum guilt, it's from the perspective of understanding what leads to mum guilt. If the journey into womanhood has this inevitable outcome that results in mum guilt, that comes from a belief somehow that mums need to be perfect, that women need to be able to just zip it up and keep marching no matter how difficult times are, and at the end of the day just get things done at whatever cost, then I want to address those beliefs and those preconceived ideas with my child in the most kid-friendly way that I can. But I'm not waiting until womanhood to have those conversations, because these are things that are all kind of embedded from early on. If I can teach my daughter that nobody can be perfect, that no one can be on top of everything, then maybe miraculously she might be able to escape the guilt that comes with highlight reel culture. Maybe she might be able to see through the fact that, you know, if I have taught her to believe that really nobody's perfect and nobody can be perfect, when she looks at people through rose-colored glasses and sees, you know, these highlights of people's lives where they've left out whether it's the support that allowed them to get to that point or the bits that they want to hide, the bits that they're not showcasing. I'm hoping that by instilling this idea in her that no one can be perfect, she's able to remove those rose-colored glasses and see through the situation much better than I did. If she ever becomes a mum, maybe she can avoid feeling like a hot mess disaster like I did billions of times when mine was the only nappy bag that wasn't stashed full of essentials, and I always seemed to have something missing and I thought there was something wrong with me. Mine is the only car that seems to be miraculously on empty when I have somewhere urgent to be. And these things are just things in my life cause me frustration, but then ultimately shame and guilt because I can't be perfect like everybody else. The most challenges that I've had in mum life have been self-inflicted shame based on misconceptions I had about what it means to be a good mum. Understanding that has been the biggest challenge for me in mum life, I can't sit back comfortably and not try to avoid that for my daughter. Mum life is amazing, it's challenging, it's hard, it's a roller coaster, and that's how it should be. It's natural because no one's an expert, especially not a new mum. And I don't ever want my daughter, should she choose to become a mum, going through these emotions of failure rather than giving herself the grace that she deserves to understand that she's learning and she's going through a process. So on that note, I wanted to make today's episode about the things that I'm conscious of raising a woman. The first thing that I'm highly conscious of is body image and beauty standards. I grew up in the 90s. I was a teen in the early 2000s. If anyone knows about toxic beauty standards, it's definitely someone who lived through the 90s and the early 2000s. I won't have conversations about weight with her present. I have slipped up a few times. My sister can attest to that. So I'm not perfect, but I intentionally make the most of any opportunity to describe a healthy body in terms of strength, in terms of flexibility, and not describing a healthy body with regards to size. I'm super conscious of that. At the same time, I also believe it's very important to be able to just comfortably share without being shamed about it that you are not feeling great in your body and you want to change. You want to feel healthier. When I do talk about wanting to make some changes, I don't talk about wanting to lose X number of kilos or to be thinner. I will say things like, I really need to do more exercise because I'm not feeling very strong at the moment, or I really need to eat better because my body's not feeling its healthiest right now. I know these sound like really small differences, but as a body obsessed teenager, I have done so many unhealthy things from such a young age just to be smaller. When I say unhealthy things, I'm talking about things like eating the same soup. What was that soup? The soup diet? I don't know. Eating the same soup every day for 2 weeks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just to shed kilos, or going on meal replacement shakes when I really was at a very healthy size and didn't need to be replacing any of my meals and any of the nutrition that came from my meals. Doing things that may be healthy for some people who do need to go down those dietary paths, but were not necessary for me. That's why I'm referring to them as unhealthy, because they were just not needed for me. My relationship with food and my body has been less than ideal, to say the least. I have hidden from activities because I was scared that my cellulite would show, and I was doing this from when I was a teenager. As an adult, I have much more cellulite than I did when I was 14, 15. And I cannot think of anything sadder than how I was behaving as a teenager, and absolutely do not want that for my daughter. It's also a very scary time for a girl to grow up with very 90s body ideals back in full force. And to add to that, social media that didn't exist when I was a kid. It's a pretty difficult thing to come up against when you're trying to raise a girl into a woman and hope that she'll be free from all the body issues that, have been around for such a long time. And this all seems very grown up because she's only 6, but in only 6 years' time, she's going to be in a completely different era of her life. So in very child-friendly ways, I think it's really important to start to reflect on these things. I'm also very intentional about including conversations that address the fact that all bodies are different and they all come in different shapes, sizes, colors, and that there is not one ideal. If my 3-year-old draws a picture, for example, of a person who only has one leg, and either he or my daughter will say something like, "Oh, we missed a leg," I'll use this as an opportunity to have a conversation about the fact that, well, not everyone has 2 legs. And then it can really lead to beautiful discussions about what's beautiful, what's natural, how people are born in all different ways, even who gets to decide what's beautiful. That I think is really important to reflect on. Who gets to determine what is beautiful or not? As a woman, I make a point of her hearing me talk positively about other women as well, complimenting them for their style, for their kindness, for their creativity, for their dedication to their goals. Because as a woman, I want her to grow up to build other women up and not to nitpick at things that is going well for them, so that she can feel better about herself. The second thing I'm so aware of is her seeing me make self-care a priority. Becoming a mum, I learnt that I actually never knew that self-care was a priority. I didn't understand it until very recently, that I was the type to engage in self-care, do nice things for myself, look after myself before having kids, simply because I had time. And then when my time became limited, that was the first thing to go because I never treated it as a priority. There is something so special to me about teaching a girl how important it is to look after herself, and that it's not only nice to do, it's something she needs to do. This is not about telling her how she has to dress or how she has to look, if she needs to wear makeup, if she needs to be hair free. None of those beauty standards I'm going going to impose onto her. That's all her choice. That's all up to her. She's asked me many times why I shave under my arms, for example, and we basically have a long discussion about the fact that that's something that I like to do, but that's a personal choice. It's a personal preference. There are people in the world that will make you feel like you have to do it. There are people in the world that will make you feel like you're only beautiful if you don't have underarm hair. That's because those people are not being respectful. And so we'll have those conversations, and she, we'll always get to the conclusion that ultimately whatever she decides to do is because it's her personal preference. So I'm not here to reinforce any beauty standards by any means. However, no matter what, there is a need to be cared for. There is a need to be healthy. Healthy hair, healthy skin, a clean body, etc. And all of those things are really important when it comes to, being a human in general, but when it comes to being a woman. And those things that really should be instilled from a young age, that need to be prioritized, so that, again, if she were to be a mum one day, she's not going 3 days unshowered and going, yes, but I wasn't able to make time for myself. All the things that I did as a mum. It's more about the ritual of self-care, that self-love, the importance of treating yourself with care and meeting your needs above everyone else's, making sure that you are aware of the fact that you might need a moment to yourself because it's all getting too much. That self-care. I tend to take the opportunity when I'm doing her hair for school, not that I'm great at doing her hair for school, but take time, do it slowly, make sure that we're talking about how nice it feels to have your hair done. She'll pick a hairstyle that she likes and how good it feels to go out the door looking the way that you think looks really nice. I always want her to know that she needs to make time for her needs, and role modeling that obviously is the most effective way to do that. So I make a point of highlighting it when I'm doing it for myself. Unfortunately, it's not a daily occurrence, and unfortunately, it's something that I still am working on. But I talk openly and honestly about the fact that I'm actually learning to make it a priority. So even though I'm not practicing what I preach necessarily, I'm still using the opportunity to explain that actually I've got something that I really need to learn because it is so important. The third thing I'm so conscious of is making any assumptions about who she's going to be when she's older. I'm very aware that it's super easy to assume that she will one day be a mum or get married or end up with a man, because these are all things that I did. But what I don't want is for her to have to confront any predetermined ideas that she had as a child based on what I imposed onto her. I also don't think it's necessary to ask her these things right now. I don't really think it's important to have a clear idea of where she wants to end up at 6, especially out of context. We did speak about it the other day when we did an episode on what it is to be a good mum. I asked her if she thinks she's going to be a mum, and her answer was, not sure, too soon to tell. And that's the first time I've actually asked her directly. So every conversation is, if you were to choose to be a mum, and then we'll continue. If you were to get married, and then we continue. And I'm very careful about the language that I use, because I don't want her to end up in a situation where she wastes so much time pursuing this life path that she just assumed was ahead for her. I've mapped it out for her. I've had these conversations, mapped things out for her. And then she wastes so much of her life until she gets to a point where she's like, well, actually, none of that's me. And I would really be upset if she felt like there was a big period of her life that was wasted because she just had been conditioned to think a particular way. I don't want to push any ideas on her, and I really would hate for her to make decisions about her life purely to please her dad or myself, because it's her life. I didn't bring her into this world to mold her life for her. I don't want to push any ideas that I have about professions or careers. She needs to live her life herself. She needs to create her own path. And I already know she's going to do amazing things no matter what she chooses to do, but I don't want her, like I said, the worst thing for me would be that she would waste her time in, the short life that we have. Mum and dad will be really disappointed if I didn't go to uni, for example, or, I'm so far behind the plan they had in mind for me, I would hate that. I don't want her being in a position where she's, for example, still living at home at an age that we have already conditioned her to think is too old to be living at home, or, not have kids if she wanted to have kids, but by a certain age that feels like she's behind the 8 ball. And the last thing I wanted to share that I consider when I'm raising a woman is what it means to be a good person. We talk a lot in our home about kindness and strength being the two most important characteristics a human needs to have. But as a woman, I'm aware that there is a lot of depth to especially a conversation about kindness. And we need to pull it apart more than just leave it at, it's important to be kind. You always need to be kind. Because that's something that I always say, like the right thing to do is kindness. If you're ever in doubt, the right thing to do is to be kind. Kindness for a woman can be quite misinterpreted and end up looking like a woman who is a total pushover, which is me to a T, and totally people pleasing, which basically just ends up being a problem for her and a problem for everyone else. I was always a kind kid, and I'd consider myself a kind adult, and I live with hundreds of memories of times when I didn't stick up for myself or when I was shortchanged just because I didn't know how to stick up for what was fair. That's why we always talk about strength at the same time. So kindness and strength come hand in hand. Strength in character or strength in the ability to speak up or strength to be able to go against the grains. If something happens to be popular just because and it doesn't sit well with you, it takes a lot of strength to be able to continue to do things your way or to go against what is popular. We also talk about the fact that being firm with others is also kind because it makes expectations really clear. We had a funny issue for a while. She does jiu-jitsu twice a week, and as part of the class, they learn a technique and then they have to practice their technique. So they're paired up and she would always be letting the other person win. And when we spoke about it, she was like, I want to be kind. And she found it difficult to bring herself to, push someone or grab onto someone or to win when it comes to, a fight with someone else. And I can't tell you how much I understand her, because even in a scenario where it's expected of me to do those things, I would find that really difficult. But we've had a conversation about how in a scenario like going to jiu-jitsu lessons, it is actually kind of you to fight hard, because if you're not fighting hard, the other kid doesn't learn. You don't learn, but the other kid, if you're more concerned about the other kid, if you're concerned about being kind and that is your motive for doing what you're doing, you're actually not doing the best for the other kid. So actually fighting hard and doing the moves the way you've been taught so the kid has the opportunity to do those back to you and challenge themselves as well is the kind thing to do in jiu-jitsu. To lay back and let them just beat you every time is not kind. And so we had to kind of flip the conversation about kindness a bit. And between us, she's absolutely smashing it now. Like, she's a little bit undefeated, which is incredible. She's she's like physically very strong. So it's really fun to watch. But it's really nice to also see her build this confidence around, you have this fight and then you shake hands, and that was the whole purpose of it. There's no hard feelings. There's no malice behind it. We are training, we're learning, and that's what we're here for. Kindness to me is a really tricky topic because it's kind when you're lining up in a queue at the supermarket. It's really kind if you see someone who's only carrying one item to let them in. But if you then step back and let all these people go in front of you, it's no longer about kindness. It's actually become something that's really unfair, and you've become this total pushover that's not respected. So that, like, there is a fine line between telling someone to be kind. The conversation around kindness can't just be left at it's really important to be kind at all times, because fairness and strength absolutely come into it as well. We spend a lot of time actually discussing situations, whether it's a situation she's had at school or something that she's heard of, or we see a show with it, like a dispute or a disagreement between two people, or something's happened. We're constantly talking about, what do you think's happened there? Was it kind that person made that decision? Was it fair? Do you think, they should have done something different? Like, we're constantly pulling scenarios apart, because one thing that I really want her to be able to do is to be super analytical when she looks at a scenario. I did a podcast episode a few weeks ago on the manosphere, and one of the things that I spoke about was raising my son during the manosphere. A lot of what I spoke about applies to my daughter, and a lot of what I'm talking about today obviously applies to my son. But one of the things that I said then, and I will continue to say now, is people end up in situations where they blindly follow the manosphere. For example, they blindly follow a thought process that someone's presented an idea to them, like a red pill idea, and without being able to break it apart or analyze, they really just go with their emotions and go with their feelings, which is quite ironic based on a lot of the comments that I'm receiving on my manosphere episode. Anyway, that's one for another day. But the whole point is that I really want to instill in my kids this ability to just not jump in with emotions first and actually step back and analyze a situation. Someone's trying to tell you something about the way the world works, or the way that, you're being ripped off because women apparently Anyway, let's not go there. Let's not go there because I've copped a lot of shit over that episode. But I just want them to be able to look at a situation and be analytical about it and not just jump in with feelings first and go, yep, oh my God, all of these people are bad, or all men are horrible, or all women, are here to rubbish men, or just really taking a step back and go, well, is that statement fair? Is that statement realistic? I want them to think about, not just going with the flow when it comes to popular opinions. The other day we had an issue about socks. My daughter was saying, I'm not sure whether to pull my socks up or fold them down. And I'm waiting to see what the other kids do. And I took that as an opportunity talking about, well, how do fashion trends start? Someone has to be a leader. There's leaders and there's followers, and you can choose which one you want to be. But what you shouldn't do is just wait and assume that you're a follower, or just wait to see what happens. What I don't want to happen is that you want to do one thing and you end up doing something else because people are telling you that the thing that you wanted to do is lame or embarrassing or something that you shouldn't be doing. That'll happen anyway, because I'm not silly. Like, I live in the real world. That happened to me in school. It's going to happen forever. But at least what I want for my kids is for them to be in that situation where someone goes, ew, you folded your socks to one fold too low. And she can turn around and go, yeah, that's because of how I want to wear them. Like, what's your point? I want her to have that attitude of like, it's just not that deep. And if she wants to follow a trend, it's because it makes sense to her or she finds it appealing. She might want to be fashion forward, and that's great, but it's not because she's basing her decisions on how people see her, or her decisions on not wanting to be ridiculed by other people or anything like that. It's because that's a decision that makes sense to her. Again, because strength is about sticking to your perspective, or having the strength to actually go, you know what? My perspective was warped. I've got more information now. Thank you for sharing your views with me. I'm going to reassess how I feel about something. I think those skills are going to be very valuable for her growing up. So I've said it 1,000 times. I'm going to say it again. I'm not a parenting expert. This is not a parenting podcast, but I do know what it is to grow up as a woman. And I feel very entrusted with raising a woman who will no doubt face the hard truths of the world around us and behind the system that we live in, but who I really hope to raise as someone who can see herself as secure, as confident, as kind and strong, and who also builds others up in that way as well. At the end of the day, we just want our kids to have a good life and contribute to this crazy world. So I hope you enjoyed those little considerations that I have when I'm raising a woman in 2026. So here, mama, take some leftovers. I love you to pieces and I cannot wait to see you next time. Bye.